I was 9 when my father first said it. Boys who chase big dreams end up chasing other men's shadows. He said it to my reflection, really, standing behind me in the hallway mirror while he straightened his tie. I watched his hands tug the knot until it sat like a clenched fist beneath his throat. He was a bank manager, the dependable sort who hated surprises but loved balances that reconciled to the rupee. In our house, certainty wasn't just a virtue, it was the only currency that mattered. My name is Ayan. I grew up in a little 3-bedroom off Tariq Road where the walls remembered every argument. My mother, Nadia, had a voice warm as tea left on the stove, always ready, always simmering. My sister Mina was 2 years younger and born curious. She dismantled radios to see how songs moved inside their ribs. And then there was my father, Saeed, who ruled the dinner table like a court with endless proceedings. "You want to design apps?" he asked when I was 16, flipping through a report card with more ahs than comments. "Tell me how a drawing on a screen pays for electricity. Tell me how a button feeds a family." "It's not drawing," I said. "It's code. It's a hobby," he cut in. "You will study accounting or economics. You will learn the language of money, not its fantasies." I remember the weight of silence that followed, the way Mother's fork hovered just above her plate. Mina nudged my knee under the table. It was her way of saying, "Don't start a war you can't win." But the war had already started. I built my first app on a borrowed laptop that wheezed like an asthmatic when Chrome had more than 4 tabs open. The app did something simple. It let neighborhood shopkeepers record credit without the notebooks that got stained by rain and thumb grease. I called it Caught Cloud Corny. Yes. But when the uncle at the corner bakery said he'd pay for it if I kept it free, I laughed for 3 minutes straight. Dad didn't laugh. "What you call free has a cost," he said, tapping his temple. "It costs attention. It costs discipline. It costs respect for real work." Real work to him was the kind you could show on a pay stub. He kept his in a folder he called proof. Proof that he had carried us through dry seasons. Proof that life obeyed spreadsheets. Proof that men became fathers when they mastered the art of the predictable. When I won a national coding contest my first year of college, 15,000 rupees, and a certificate with my name spelled correctly, he folded the paper in half and then half again, until the edges bit my palm when he handed it back. "This is a nice hobby," he said. "Don't let it distract you." "Baba," I said softly, "it's not a hobby." He smiled, sad, tired. "Then it is a phase." I learned to build in the margins of his certainty. Nights, I would code with headphones on, the thin blue glow of the screen the only light in my room. Mina would sneak in with tea and questions. "How does the phone know it owes Abdul Uncle 90 rupees?" She'd ask, eyes shining. "It doesn't know," I said. "It remembers. And it tells the truth when asked." She nodded like I'd told her a secret about the moon. I got a small seed investment after graduation from a venture program run by a Pakistani diaspora group in Dubai. $50,000. No salary for me, but enough to recruit 2 friends, Amrita, a back-end magician who believed coffee was a love language, and Danielle, who wore hoodies to weddings. We moved into a cramped office above a mechanic's shop. The whole place smelled like oil and ambition. "Make sure you keep receipts," Dad said when I told him, "so that when this collapses, we can see where the money went." He wasn't angry. He was certain. That hurt more. I stopped telling him the good news because praise from him felt like a trick that would flip and bite my hand. Yet I still wanted it. God, I wanted it like sunlight. Some nights I whispered to the ceiling, "If I succeed, will he let me be a son again?" And some other nights I thought, "If I fail, at least I'll finally be the thing he already thinks I am." Kata Cloud kept growing. Shopkeepers told other shopkeepers, and transactions multiplied like sparrows at dawn. We added Urdu voice prompts for those who didn't read well and built offline modes for places where the signal came and went like unreliable love. It started to feel real. Then Mina sent me a text. "Baba's birthday. Mom wants a big family lunch. Don't be late." I stared at the screen. Family lunches weren't meals, they were audits. But I went because love is a debt I willingly carry. At the table, my uncles talked about property rates and my cousins compared exam scores like battle scars. My father looked pleased in a way I hadn't seen since childhood, a man surrounded by the evidence of a life well organized. He lifted his glass. "Two simple paths," he said, "and two sons who choose them." I forced a smile. In my pocket, a notification buzzed Amrita with a message. "We got the term sheet. Call me." My heart kicked like a door breaking open. But I didn't stand. I didn't share. Not here, not now. I held my breath and swallowed the news like it was too big for this room. The tension was always there, a tightness around my ribs. It followed me home that day, crawled into bed, and slept with its head on my chest. I knew the main event was coming, the moment when my dreams and my father's design would collide in public. Not as a private ache, but as a spectacle. I just didn't know how loud it would be. My cousin Bilal announced his engagement, which meant the whole extended family gathered for the dolki at his fiancée's house near Clifton. The place was huge, tiles that glowed like polished water and a chandelier extravagant enough to make even my mother whisper, "Mashallah." That night was supposed to be about Billy, about songs and laughter and sweets. I should have been safe. I arrived with Mina in a rickety Kareem, my palms sweaty around a gift bag that contained a carefully chosen fountain pen. The doorman looked at my scuffed sneakers and asked for our invitation twice. Inside, the air was chilled enough to make the silk sari shiver. "Look who finally came," Billa called, half joking, half judging. He wore a sherwani that fit him like a blessing. Ion, the startup star. Or is it still starting? It was a joke, I told myself. He was always like that. Dad drifted over with two of his bank colleagues in tow. Men I recognized from years of Eid, visits, Mr. Kamal and Mr. Iqbal, both mustaches and gentle disapproval. "This is my son," Dad said, in a tone that tasted like caution. "Trying to be a businessman through his phone?" Mr. Kamal chuckled. "Ah, apps. My nephew did one for photos with cat ears." Laughter? I smiled along, felt my ears burn. "We help small shops keep records," I said. "It's boring, but boring doesn't pay," Bilal cut in, winking at the uncles. "Unless you're a banker." My father's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy, steering me into their circle. "I keep telling him," he said, "there is dignity in steady work. But young people," he shrugged, "they think they will be tycoons by Mr. Iqbal nodded. "And by 30, they're back living with their parents." I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there watching the story of me being written without me. I heard my mother laugh across the hall, proud and distracted, and I squeezed the gift bag until the paper crinkled. "Actually, Baba," I began, voice thinner than I wanted. "We just closed a round from," he raised a palm without looking at me. A fatherly traffic cop. "Let the elders talk, Beta." The word Beta sun-landed like a padlock. I shut my mouth. Later, after the songs. After Billow's mother had slipped gold bangles over his fiancée's wrists while everyone clapped. There was cake and speeches. Someone handed my father the microphone. He wasn't part of the immediate family, but he had the kind of face that made committees wish they'd included him in the planning. "Bismillah," he began. "On behalf of the elders, I want to speak of stability. Marriage is not a romance. It is a balance sheet, assets, liabilities, and accountability." Laughter again. He knew how to do this, how to make wisdom sound like a song everyone knew the words to. "And to our young people," he continued. And my chest tightened because I knew where this was going. Remember that success is measured by consistency. Not by gambling on fantasies. Not by chasing the wind and calling it innovation. Eyes drifted toward me. Or maybe that was my paranoia kissing my spine. I felt smaller than my shoes. He found me through the microphone's gaze. "Some of us," he said, "need to be reminded that dignity does not come from trying to earn more than your father. It comes from learning from him." The room hummed. It wasn't a slap. It was a public doubting, slippery and soft like oil on marble. I could slip and fall, and no one would admit they'd pushed. Mina's fingers found my forearm and pressed. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." But humiliation is a kind of gravity that drags words out of your mouth even when you bite them. I stepped forward. Baba. I said, I'm not trying to outturn you. I'm trying to build something that matters. A hush. Not quiet exactly, but a thinning of noise, like the room had exhaled and forgotten to inhale. He smiled, and I despised that smile. It was for the audience, generous and patient. And that is what I'm saying. Ion. Build something real, not a dream on a screen. It is real, I said, heat building in my throat. Real has salaries and benefits and provident fund, he said, laughter rising again like obedient birds. Not beanbags and chai at 2 a.m., the mic crackled. Bilal took it back, saving the party from becoming our battlefield. Okay, speech is over, he said. Back to the music. But the damage had already been done. I felt like a theater set that looked like a house until someone tried to open a door and discovered there was nothing behind it. I walked out onto the balcony where the city hummed with secrets. I could hear my father's voice through the glass, telling a story that kept me small enough to fit in it. I leaned against the rail and asked the night a question. What is the cost of your own father not believing in you? Amrita called just then. You disappeared, she said. Everything okay? I laughed, sharp and humorless. Define okay. Investor dinner went well, she said. The fund wants to lead. And are you ready? They want to talk IPO path in 18 months, if we hit the milestones. The words punched air back into my lungs. IPO. 3 letters that meant daylight. I closed my eyes and saw the route the way a climber sees the mountain teeth of rock. Yes, but also the summit catching fire at dawn. Send me the notes, I whispered. Tomorrow we start sprint planning. When I went back inside, my father didn't look at me. Maybe he felt relief at having said what he needed to say. Maybe he felt nothing at all. I told myself it didn't matter. But that night, as I lay in bed replaying his words, I felt the old ache turn into something else, something with teeth. If he wouldn't give me dignity, I would take it from the world. And if he called it pride, then pride would be my witness. The months after the Dolki moved like a drum roll. We hired field teams across Karachi and Lahore, onboarding shopkeepers alley by alley, bazaar by bazaar. Amrita led infrastructure like a maestro. Taniel built interfaces so simple they felt stolen from the future. I sold like my life depended on it because, in a way, it did. Every no from an investor was my father's voice with a different accent. Every yes was a small rebellion. We hit our milestones faster than anyone predicted. When we launched a lending feature, micro advances based on transaction history, our retention doubled. Shopkeepers stopped calling it an app and started calling it the book, like something sacred. Investors stopped asking me about Katir filters. Still lived at home. I told myself it was to save money, but really it was the last battlefield I wasn't ready to abandon. Morning tea with my mother. Mina's jokes in the hallway. My father's footsteps, firm as punctuation. We were a story I hadn't finished writing, and I was afraid of how it ended if I left. One evening, I came home to find my father sitting at the dining table with an envelope open in front of him. His face was not his face. It was a crumpled version, a newspaper left in rain. What's wrong? I asked, trying not to sound afraid. He moved the envelope toward me with 2 fingers. The bank is restructuring, he said. They're offering early retirement. Encouraging it. The word encouraging felt sinister, like a hand on the back pushing you toward a door. Do you have to take it? He stared at the table. If I don't, there will be transfers. Less pay, less respect. His voice cracked on that last word. They say it is voluntary. But a man knows when he is being asked to make space. Something tender rose in me, something I hadn't let myself feel around him for a long time. Pity, yes, but also rage on his behalf. The system that turned even the dignified into inventory. I'm sorry, I said. He cleared his throat. It is not your problem to solve, Ion. But the way he closed the envelope told me we were both lying. Over the next few weeks, he grew smaller in the house. The man who made dinner conversation, Into lectures now retreated to the balcony with his tea, watching nothing, watching everything. My mother tried to fill the silence with recipes and relatives' minor scandals. Mina started spending nights at her friends' places, unmoored by a father who was suddenly, what was the word? Breakable. Then the twist arrived, lightning, in a brown envelope. My father had borrowed against his retirement fund to cover a loan he had co-signed years ago for his cousin Haroon. The cousin had defaulted. The bank wanted Dad to make it right. Why didn't you tell us? I asked, voice low, with the effort of staying calm. He stood by the sink, fists braced on the counter. Because it is my mess, he said. My responsibility. My dignity. There it was again, dignity, the border he was willing to starve to defend. How much? I asked. He hesitated. 25 lakhs. I ran the math in my head. Manageable for the company. It's catastrophic for our family. I should have offered it instantly, just as a son. But the wound in me stirred, mean and alive. The son who had been told his work wasn't real wanted to say, is this real enough? I hated that part of me even as I fed it. Papa, I said carefully, I can help. He shook his head with app money. There it was, the lash. I flinched. Money is money, I said. Banks accept it. He looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw not a general surveying troops, but a man trying not to fail. I will handle it, he said, somehow. He didn't. Or rather, he handled it by shrinking from us, by turning into a quiet shape that moved through the house at odd hours. And then one afternoon, while I was on a fundraising call, Mina texted me in all caps, "Come home now. Please." I arrived to find a crowd in our living room. Dad's old colleagues, 2 relatives, a man in a suit I didn't recognize, my mother crying in a way that sounded like hiccups. Dad had collapsed at the bank after being told they'd file legal action over the loan. He was okay, they said, but his blood pressure was high, and the doctor had told him to avoid stress, advice that lands like a joke in a world that never stops shouting. The man in the suit introduced himself. Mr. Qureshi, legal liaison. If your family can settle within 30 days, he said, we can avoid court. I nodded. Send me the exact figure and the paperwork. My father tried to protest, even from the couch, his hand lifting like a flag. No, Baba, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. Let me do this. He stared up at me. Something in him weighed me, not like a traitor now, but like a possibility. He closed his eyes and nodded. That night, after the house had quieted and my mother had run out of prayers to whisper, I stared at the ceiling fan and felt the universe tilt. The son had become not the father, but something else, the boundary between our family and collapse. It wasn't victory. It was a revelation. The old rules were over. I wired the money the next morning. The bank confirmed receipt. Mr. Qureshi sent a polite email promising to update the file. I forwarded the receipts to Dad with a single line. Handled. He didn't reply. A week later, we closed our Series B with the fund that had once doubted us. The check could have bought our entire building twice. The partner sent champagne. We sent it back and asked for mithai instead. When the announcement went public, my phone turned into a firework messages from school friends, old professors, strangers who called me sir as if success had aged me overnight. At dinner, my mother tried to celebrate. We are proud of you, she said, and the we hung in the air like a paper lantern. My father pushed rice around his plate. Congratulations, he said after a moment, not looking up. So many numbers. They're not just numbers, I said. They're predictions, he said. Mina put her spoon down. Baba, she said softly, he helped you. He glanced at me then, briefly, as if trying to reconcile 2 images, the boy with apps and the man who had paid off a debt. He nodded once, reluctant. It was not acceptance. But it was a crack in the wall. The twist within the twist arrived 2 days later. Our lead investor wanted to explore a direct listing and accelerated path to the public markets. You're profitable in core markets, the partner said. The story is clean. Timing is perfect. Timing perfect. Words that smelled like danger and destiny. I thought of my father's speech at the Dolkabat, men who chased the wind, and felt something like laughter bubble up. Not mockery, relief. The wind, it turned out, could push ships as well as scatter papers. The revelation was complete. My life would not wait for his permission. I had spent too long asking his mirror for a reflection. It was time to build my own. The day our IPO launched, Karachi woke, damp and sparkling, a city trying on a holiday. The ticker symbol KHTC flickered across financial channels like a rumor becoming a fact. Our office was crowded with employees in their best clothes. Cameras from local stations, cake with frosting that tasted like optimism. Amrita had printed a banner that read, "From Kata to Capital 4, every shop on every street." Danielle was already crying. I invited my family, of course. My mother wore a navy shalwar kameez with sequins like bits of sky. Mina put on a white kameez and a mischievous grin. My father came in a suit that had known better years. He stood near the back of the room, hands clasped behind him like he was inspecting a bank branch. "Thank you for coming," I said, kissing my mother's cheek, squeezing Mina's shoulder. Nodding to my father like we were colleagues avoiding awkwardness. He cleared his throat. It seemed important. When the bell rang, yes, we had borrowed a literal brass bell, partly for symbolism. Partly because we were still a little dramatic, everyone clapped. The live stream from the exchange showed our logo spinning like a coin that never landed. Numbers rolled across the screen. Orders stacked. And then, in a heartbeat that felt a year long, the price jumped. The room erupted. Sound became wind. Arms wrapped me. Laughter beat against my suit like bird wings. I looked at the screen again. Our valuation had crossed a figure that once. In a notebook, I had circled and drawn a star next to, and written, "Ridiculous, but imagine." And then I saw him, my father, not clapping, not smiling. He was staring at the screen the way a man stares at a stranger who looks exactly like him. For a moment, I was 9 again, and he was fitting his tie, and certainty was a wall I couldn't climb. I walked over. "Baba," I said, "we did it." He turned to me slowly. In his eyes were 3 emotions playing musical chairs: pride, fear, and something like grief. "Does this mean," he asked, voice nearly lost under the celebration, "that you will earn more than me?" I could have laughed. The vindictive part of me wanted to shout the number, to make it a trumpet. But another part, the part that had watched him shrink under the weight of a restructuring and a debt knot, even born from his own mistakes, kept me gentle. "It means the shopkeepers who trusted us will get more," I said. "It means our people will be okay. It means you don't have to worry about the future so much." He blinked. "You always were a sentimental accountant." I smiled. "You taught me to reconcile." Amrita called me to the front for a speech. I took the mic and looked out at my team, my family, the cameras, the balloon arch, losing air in slow motion. When we started, I said, people told us small merchants were too hard to serve, too fragmented, too messy. But messy is just another word for human. We decided to build software that respected the human. Today isn't about numbers. It's about proof that dignity scales. I let that word hang there. Dignity. Also, I added, grinning, for anyone who still thinks we're a Katir filter. Please meet our revenue. Laughter, applause. I thanked the investors and the engineers and the uncles who kept sweet shops open through power cuts. Then I took a breath and did something I hadn't planned. "And I want to thank my father," I said, voice steady, "who taught me to love what is real. Who made me argue for my dreams until I knew I wanted them. We didn't always see eye to eye, but he is the reason I learned to stand." The room turned toward him like sunflowers. He looked as if someone had taken the floor out from under his certainty and replaced it with a softer thing that held. Somehow, anyway. He nodded once, slow, a king laying down a sword. After the speech, reporters swarmed. They asked about market share, compliance, cross-border expansion. I answered with polished truth, thinking the real story was happening behind me, where my mother was hugging my father so tightly his shoulders rose. Then the justice, if that's what you want to call it, arrived in the form of Billa, flanked by cousins who had developed sudden allergies to humility. "Bye," he shouted over the music. "Big man now? How many millions, Han?" I laughed. "Enough to buy your Sherwani." He smirked. "So it's true. You're richer than your father now." I looked at my father. He was watching us, not unkindly, but with that old tension in his jaw. The room quieted a little, sensing a spectacle. Family is a theater that rehearses itself. "Yes," I said, loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. "I am. And it doesn't make me more of a son or less of one. It just makes me more responsible." Something in Billa's face faltered. He had expected swagger, not duty. He tried to recover. "Well, remember the simple people when you're buying your helicopters." "Helicopters are too loud," I said. "We're buying silence for our parents." The words landed like a cone. The cousins blinked. Billa mumbled something about snacks and retreated to the safety of fried samosas. Later, when most of the cameras had left and employees had loosened their collars, I pulled my father onto the little stage. I handed him the bell's rope. "Ring it," I said. He shook his head. "This is your moment." "It's ours," I said. "You kept this family standing when there was nothing but your salary between us and fear. Let people see who I learned courage from." He looked at me a long time, the way he had looked at balance sheets, at loan applications, at lives that needed approving. Then he pulled the rope. The bells sang, and the room answered with applause that was not for me this time, but for a man who had measured success differently and still showed up to witness another version of it. In that applause, I heard more than justice. I heard forgiveness. The night after the IPO, our house felt both familiar and strange, like an old song remixed. Mina made jokes about upgrading the Wi-Fi and ordering furniture that didn't squeak. My mother fussed over a tray of sweets from a bakery that had used our app for 3 years. We ate late, sitting on the floor just to prove we still could. When the dishes were cleared and the house fell into the soft quiet of tired joy, my father joined me on the balcony. The city pulsed below, the way it does when people are telling each other stories at the same time. "I was hard on you," he said without preface. I didn't speak. I let the admission breathe. "I thought dignity came from making the world small enough to manage," he continued, voice low. "Your mother always knew it came from making yourself big enough to risk." I swallowed. "I wanted your blessings so badly that every doubt felt like a nail," I said. "I started building to prove you wrong. It worked. But it also hurt." He nodded, eyes on the streetlights. "My father taught me that love is protection," he said. "I forgot that love is also permission." We stood there, two men with different educations, finally comparing notes. "I don't want to humiliate you," I said, thinking of the dolky, of all the little cuts. "I wanted you to see me. That's all." He smiled, tired and soft. "I see you, Ion." It should have felt like victory. It felt like something better release. We made changes after that, some small, some loud. I paid off the remainder of the retirement-linked loan and set up a monthly stipend for my parents that my mother tried to refuse, and my father tried to negotiate like a contract. "This is not charity," I said. "It's reciprocity." He finally agreed, only after asking to review the paperwork. I let him, and he corrected 2 typos with relish. Mina, inspired by the chaos and the calm that followed, joined our product team. She introduced a feature that translated bills into audio messages in Pashto and Sindhi. "Not everyone reads like a developer," she said, tapping my forehead. "Some of us listen." On Sundays, my father began walking to the market and talking to shopkeepers about our app, like a secret he was proud to share. Sometimes he would return with handwritten notes, feedback, requests. "Thanks." He'd present them to me like a bouquet of receipts. "Real data," he'd say, a twinkle returning to its old place. The family ecosystem reset itself. Bilal stopped making jokes in front of me and started making them behind my back, which felt like progress. At gatherings, when uncles asked what I did, my father answered before I could, describing features with the awkward precision of someone who had studied to get it right. "Offline mode," he would say, as if reciting a poem. "Of course, not every wound closes neatly. We still argued sometimes about risk, about speed, about the way growth can make you forget the ground. But the fights were different now. They weren't about whether I was real. They were about how to stay responsible inside our reality. That is a better argument, a kinder war. I often think about the humiliation at the Dolki, how it burned and then lit a path. Anger is a crude fuel, but it burns long. What matters is what you cook with it. I used it to boil down my need for approval to its essence. I wanted to be seen by the person who taught me to look. The IPO didn't fix that. We did, slowly, in the quiet, with tea, with apologies that weren't perfect but were honest. If you're listening to this because someone told you that your dream isn't real unless it comes with a paycheck that fits their frame, listen to me. Your work is not a forecast, it's a river. It moves because you do. And when it floods, it will carve new maps, even in the stone of your family's expectations. On the day after the bell rang, I went back to the office while most of the team took a deserved holiday. The rooms were oddly still, as if success had stepped outside to smoke and would be back any minute. I walked through the empty desks, trailing my fingers over the backs of chairs. On Amrita's monitor was a sticky note. Dreams equals design plus deadlines. On Daniel's, a doodle of a bell with motion lines. In the conference room, I found a box I hadn't opened. Inside was the old fountain pen I'd bought for Billow's engagement. He'd forgotten it at our office after the IPO party, probably too busy trying to measure my life with helicopter jokes. I uncapped it and wrote a sentence on a fresh page of the whiteboard. Dignity scales when we share it. I stood back and let the words feel larger than me. They were. When I got home, I found my father at the table with a stack of papers. For a second, panic tightened my chest. More debts. More forms. He looked up and smiled. Really smiled and slid a document toward me. "It's the prospectus," he said. "I downloaded it and printed it. I thought maybe you could sign it for me." I laughed, startled and full. "You want my autograph?" "I want to remember," he said, tapping the page, "that we can be made wrong and still love each other. That being wrong is not the end, only a turn." I signed the margin like a schoolboy signing a yearbook. He pressed the page flat with his palm, as if smoothing a future. That night, as the city quieted and the fans hummed, I let myself return to the hallway mirror where this started. To the boy watching his father tug a tie until it sat like a clenched fist. I wanted to tell that boy that someday the tie would loosen. That the hand that tugged it would also lift a bell rope and make a sound that felt like blessing. I wanted to tell him that the sentence "you will never earn more than me" would one day become "you have earned enough for all of us." I don't know if justice looks like public applause or private peace. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's the moment your father asks you to sign the prospectus so he can frame it next to his old pay stubs. And neither document cancels the other. Maybe it's a family learning to count differently. Not salaries against salaries, but courage against fear and love against pride. Some nights when the house is asleep and the city is a ripe fruit beyond the balcony, I whisper a thank you to the version of my father who doubted me. He kept me sharp. And then I whisper a louder thank you to the version who changed. He kept me human. This is my story. I don't know if it fits in a spreadsheet. I only know it reconciles. And when I ring the memory of that bell in my head, I hear not victory, but belonging. If you're where I was, small in a room that wants you smaller, stand anyway. Build anyway. Let them measure you by their rulers while you learn to fly. Someday, when you land, invite them aboard. Not to prove they were wrong, but to prove that home can be big enough for more than one kind of dignity. If this story hit home, smash that like to tell the algorithm more, please. Drop a comment. What's one thing someone said you'd never do, then you did it anyway? I read every single one. Subscribe for more long-form family drama with real payoffs and tap the so you never miss a twist. Send this to a friend who needs that push today, and I'll see you in the next chapter.